Gemini from the beginning was built to be a multimodal model.
If we want to build AGI and powerful AI systems that can perform these general human tasks, vision is a core component of the human experience. These models should be able to see and perceive the world like we do.
I think vision still feels like one of the areas where there's the biggest gap between the model capability and the products that people are building.
I think we're very early in that world
because
it takes time for people to build intuition for what these models can do.
This productivity bit is what I'm most excited about.
We see a world where everything is vision, and these models can see your screen, see the world just like we can, but they're also domain experts in every field, which I think is a future that I'm super excited by.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Release Notes. Today we're chatting with Ani Baddepudi, who's the multimodal vision product lead for Gemini and also newly the product lead for Gemini model behavior. So thanks for coming on to talk all things Gemini multimodal.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think Gemini from the beginning was built to be a multimodal model. What does that mean in practice? Why was that the case actually going back to Gemini 1.0 when we sort of planted the flag that we were going to build a language model that was multimodal? Can you sort of share that context?
Yeah, totally. So DeepMind has been working on multimodal capabilities for a long time. And the reason for this is if we want to build AGI and powerful AI systems that can perform these general human tasks, vision is a core component of the human experience. So tasks in various domains like medicine, finance, and so on have a strong visual component. So the vision with Gemini from the Gemini 1.0 days was to have a model that can see and perceive the world like people can, which enables these models to perform these tasks in that manner.
I think about this all the time because it feels like if you look at AI products in a lot of ways, they're sort of screaming to be multimodal. And it's so many of these weird product experiences you have to build if you're just building for this text world. And in a lot of ways, the solution is is making it multimodal and showing the model something visually. Mm-hmm. And we've pushed on the multimodal live API thread. And that's a great example of this playing out where people can actually go and build that stuff. What is it back to this thread of Gemini being multimodal, what does it actually mean from a model perspective for it to be a quote unquote natively multimodal model? What does that mean actually?
Yeah, so we have a single model that's trained to be multimodal from the ground up. At a high level, what this means is text, images, video, audio, all these modalities are turned into a token representation, and the model is trained on all of this information together. What this results in is a model that can understand not just text, but text with images and audio and video and so on. So the abstraction that I like to think of these models at is they should be able to see and perceive the world like we do. And that's the goal behind training these models to be natively multimodal and trained this way from ground up.
Yeah. Well, is there some do you get a compression loss effect when you do that? When I think about how I think of tokens as just numbers under the hood. And then I think of an image and it's the picture's worth 1,000 words. So how much do you, but it also feels at the same time that the models are really good at multimodal. So what is there some magic happening there that makes it so that you don't lose all of the nuance of things?
Yeah, totally. So a couple of things. The first is, losing information from images is a big research problem. When we turn images into token representations, we inherently lose some information from the image. This is a constant research question of how do we make our image representations less lossy. The second is when we extrapolate to video, we sample videos at 1 frame per second. And during training, there are other tricks we can use, but we lose information because the model's not seeing the entire video stream. So there is some information loss. I think the thing that's really surprising is these models generalize pretty well. So once it sees enough images and it like sees videos, even if they're sampled at 1 frame per second, these capabilities generalize pretty well. And it's kind of mind blowing what these models are then able to do. So yeah, these are like constant research questions that we're working on.
Yeah, I think if for folks listening to this, if they haven't seen, we put out a blog post about Gemini 2.5 Pro having state-of-the-art model performance on video understanding, and like it's a very visual use case. And I think it's like, go read the blog post because there's a ton of different a ton of like really great visual use cases and applets that we built in AI Studio and others to like showcase this capability. But how much is that like the video to like image related? Is it like there's a lot more complexity that happens from a model perspective on making videos work well, or is it like actually just like pass a bunch of images behind the scene?
Yeah, so video with the 2.5 models is like pretty mind-blowing. And I'd say there are like a few things. The first is previous Gemini models, they were pretty good at video, but like robustness was a bit of an issue. So like one of the issues that we had, for example, was like if you fed in like an hour-long video to a model, the model would focus in on the first 5 and 10 minutes and then trail off for the rest of the video. So there are like some of these quality aspects that the team has worked a ton on. And these are like very video specific, especially like long context video, which is like really like the upshot of these capabilities. The second is just like core vision improvements, and that like generalizes to video as well. So like one really cool example that we highlight in the blog post is the ability to turn videos into code. And this enables a ton of cool things. You can turn videos into animations. You can turn videos into like websites. So I fed in like a YouTube video of like a recipe and turned that into like a step-by-step recipe. A use case that we see people using a lot is videos of like lectures and like turning that into like lecture web pages and lecture notes and stuff.
Makes college sound fun.
Yeah.
I just take a bunch of boring lectures and feed them to AI, and it like makes it all interactive and like
Totally.
a custom learning experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And like these things turn into like interactive apps that you can like learn with. So I think the really cool thing about Gemini 2.5 is that it unlocks video as a medium of information to do really useful things. So yeah, like I'd say it's a bit of both.
Ani, you and I talk a bunch about how, there's actually so many different vision use cases like bundled under this multimodal umbrella. And there's like all the OCR stuff, video understanding, probably 50 other things that I don't even know about or think about that often. How do you think about this from a multimodal product Gemini side? And like, what's the relationship and the interplay between all these capabilities? Is it like, are they independent of each other? Do you see gain across all of them when one gets better? What's the relationship?
Yeah, two things. The first is I think we see like the pro of having like a single multimodal model is that we see a ton of positive capability transfers. One of the cool things about this 2.5 launch is things like video to code work really well because the 2.5 models are just like a lot stronger at code. The second is like even within vision, we see a ton of like capability transfer. Like in the past, a ton of these, like you would have had separate models for vision capabilities, like a separate OCR model, a separate detection, segmentation model, and so on. The cool thing now is like all of this is like bundled into Gemini, and that and like that results in like a ton of cool use cases. So for example, like say I'm like transcribing a video that requires strong OCR, but that also requires strong temporal understanding for the model to be able to understand what happens in the video and then transcribe that. One use case that like we're like super excited about in Gemini is using Gemini as a pair programmer.
Yeah.
So we stream in like a video of your IDE to Gemini, like ask it questions about your code base, get answers, and so on. And this is like a use case that requires strong coding capabilities, strong just like core vision, which is like spatial understanding, OCR, but then also the ability to understand a video and information in a video across time horizons, which is that like temporal reasoning piece.
I love this use case. I think I would not be, my bet is, if we look a year from now, like every developer product has something, and actually like maybe even more generic than that, like the OS is going to have something like that, like different products are going to have like custom versions of this because it's so powerful. We've seen this already from like a customer traction piece of people building with the live API. There's just like so many cool, like not run-of-the-mill AI applications that are being built, which is exciting to see because it feels like there's, lots of people doing the same stuff, and it's awesome when people go and build new things. I'm also super curious about just like how you think about what to focus on from a model capability standpoint versus where, to your point about just like as the base model gets better, it sort of raises the tide lifts all the ships, or whatever the expression is. Are there certain areas where you're like, we don't really need to make that bet from a multimodal perspective because like it's just gonna happen naturally? Or like, are you having to like explicitly track that to like see, oh no, here we need to focus on this because it's not getting better as the base model goes up?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'd like to split it out into like 3 portions.
Yeah.
The first are use cases that we see are like critical today for users and customers. So folks using the APIs, so like developers, like Google products that use Gemini for like multimodal vision use cases. So these are things that feel like short-term capabilities that we like need to make Gemini super strong at. The second piece, which I think is like very critical, are some of these like long-term aspirational capabilities. So these are things that people aren't asking us for Gemini to be able to do today, but we think are like very critical for building like powerful AI systems, AGI, and so on. Yeah. So I mean, like one of the cool examples is like visual reasoning. Like this is and we see early signs of this with the Gemini 2.5 models, is this ability to reason over pixels. And we have like a bunch of toy examples. Like, I don't know, you have like a pinball with a bunch of surfaces, and you ask Gemini like about the path that the ball would take and like which bucket it would fall into. That's like a capability that's super interesting because the model isn't reasoning over like text form, but it actually needs to reason over the image and like understand like what the trajectory of the ball would be in an image. That's like a very simple toy example, but you can extrapolate a future where this becomes critical for things like robotics. Like if robots and self-driving cars have AI systems like Gemini powering like embodied reasoning, that unlocks a ton of use cases. So like these are things that like customers aren't asking us for today, but like the team is super excited by, and we think are like very important for building AGI. The third, like you say, are things that we get surprised by, like things we can't plan for. And this happens just from like scaling our models up. So 2.5 was a great example of this. Like we didn't plan particularly for these models to be like this amazing at like image to code and video to code, but this turned out to be like a super strong capability with 2.5. And I think the key is like when we see early signs of this happening, figuring out what the use cases are and like where these things can be really powerful. So an example of this is like UX to code. Like I think the workflows of like designers and product managers change completely with these capabilities. Like now I can sketch a UX, feed that into Gemini, and it generates like a pretty good prototype using like HTML or like JavaScript, React for that UX interface. And I think these types of things are super cool and are like capabilities that we get surprised by.
This makes being a PM way more fun. Through this lens of stuff that you and I spend a bunch of time talking about, one of the bits is just like, what are people actually building with multimodal? And like, how do we, help the people who are building interesting stuff now, but also like help sort of try to convince builders and startup founders, like, here's all the next things you could be building. Here's what are the good ideas. Here are the capabilities. Through that lens, like what is some of the stuff that you're most excited about from a vision standpoint and like the product experience people could be building with this stuff versus what I think they're building now, which is not that much interest, some interesting stuff, but there's lots more capability to pull out of the model still, I think.
Yeah, so I think we're starting to see people do some like really cool things with vision, and some of this just happens as the models get strong enough to like make these things work. Yeah, I like to think of this in like three buckets. Like the first are use cases that like existing models or systems were like able to do. So these are things like traditional OCR, translate, image retrieval. So like Google Lens does this really well for things like shopping, like find a similar sweater, and things like classification, like help me identify this plant or this animal and so on. So I think we're seeing a lot of usage in this sphere of things because people are used to using existing vision modules for these things, and like Gemini like is a single model that's like able to do all these things. I think it starts to get more interesting when we look at the second and third. The second, like the set of use cases that I like to think of like Gemini being able to do are tasks that like a human could do, or say you had like an expert in a given domain with you, tasks that they could do. So these are things like we like travel to London a bunch for work, and like something I've really enjoyed doing is like taking Gemini out and like walking around the city and like asking questions about things around me.
Yeah.
Previously, I would have had to like figure out a question in text to ask Google, get a response, but now I have like a completely lossless way of asking these questions using vision. Another cool use case that I was trying the other day was I had a Google Doc with a bunch of comments, and I took a screenshot of the doc with the comments, fed that into Gemini, and I was like, hey, like help me rewrite this doc while like answering these comments. Gemini did a pretty good job. I think like 50% of the comments were addressed perfectly. 30% were like pretty good. I needed to make minor tweaks. 20% I had to rewrite. But I think if we extrapolate this, we see like a world where like everything is vision, and these models can like see your screen, see the world like just like we can, but they're also domain experts in like every field, which I think is like a future that I'm super excited by. The third set are use cases that I think of as like beyond human, or like beyond tasks that humans could do in like a feasible amount of time. So these are things like being able to watch a 6-hour-long video and like find specific moments where things happen. So like, I don't know, you feed in like a very long sports game and you generate a highlights reel. Like this takes a lot of time for a human to do. Or generating fine-grained segmentation masks on an image is like something that is like hard for humans to do. Like another example is like some of the video to code things where you have a video and you can turn that into like an interactive like learning application. These are things that would take people like a long time to do, but you can just like zero shot Gemini with these things. And I think we're like very early in that world because it takes time for people to build intuition for what these models can do. And also takes time for us to build the interfaces for people to do these things smoothly. But I'm really excited for like a world where we can like really tackle like the second and third piece.
How different do you think those products tackling the second and third bit look from today's bar? Is it like imagine I have a AI chat app today, and I want to sort of fully embrace this world of like, everything is vision through that mantra, which I love. That we should make sure I'm gonna have shirts made that say everything is vision. Nice. What's the delta? Like, what do folks actually have to do if they want to sort of buy into that world? Because I do think like builders are like trying to find the edge in today's world, and I think you and I again have had this conversation a bunch of time that like there's so many interesting edges for people building in vision right now, just because there's not that many products in the space. So I don't know, do you have any advice of like how to do the exploration to find the experience?
Yeah, so something that I really like doing is anthropomorphizing these models as much as I can. So thinking of these models as expert humans at a given task and treating the interface in a manner that like a human would perform a given task in, or like do something in. I think as an industry, we like defaulted to chat as an interface primarily because like humans are very used to using chat. Like we like message all the time, we use search for retrieval and so on. But I actually think some of these like human modes of communication and like interaction are actually far more natural. Part of this like model's getting good enough to do these things, and I think we're like getting there. So I think the thing that I really think about is like, can we make these models feel as natural as possible? And like the world was like built for humans. So I think it makes sense to like build these machines and these systems in the same way. But yeah, there's like still some work to get there. Like a vision of the future that I'm really excited by is like today, like most AI products are term-based. So you like query the model or like even a system, you get back an answer, query the model again, you get back an answer, and you like repeat that process. In this view of the world where like everything is vision, products that like I'm super excited by are like having a world where the interface of interacting with AI systems is like a bidirectional like audio video interface, right? So this results in some cool things like your model can understand audio and video just like a human would. It can be proactive. So based on visual cues, it can like suggest for like
This
suggest
is what
for
I
things to do.
This productivity bit is what I'm most excited about, because I think there's so many use cases where I'm like, yeah, I could ask the model, like if I'm showing if the model can see my screen on my computer for something, I could ask the model to do it. I'm like, I don't really want to. Like, I'd like to just like write like, here are the things you know, you could do for me. Like, take action on these whenever this thing happens on the screen. Like, that would be like, I get an error in my terminal. Like, I kind of want the model to just like go and, you know, find a bunch of stuff and give me suggestions to fix without me having to like actually talk to the model. So it is this like interesting, yeah, there's like so many interesting product directions, and it actually feels like it's like actually not that complicated to build that, which is also really interesting. Like, it's just a live API with a bunch of the stuff that we just shipped in it, and like out of the box, it can do a lot.
Exactly. So the crazy thing is these models are like pretty good at these things today. I think one way that I like to think of what new products could look like is like, imagine you had like an expert human looking over your shoulder and seeing what you can see and like helping you with things. I think like the form factor where this works today is like screen share, because you can like feed your screen into a model and like you're looking at your screen to perform tasks. One example that I've used Gemini Live for is like, I was cooking, and previously I would have had to like follow a step-by-step recipe and try and pattern match what I'm doing to the recipe. And like more often than not, like it doesn't turn out exactly like what's in the recipe. Something cool that Gemini can do is it like looks at what you're doing as you're doing it, and then proactively, based on visual cues in the video, suggests for things to do, right? So I don't know, I was like boiling pasta. I was like, hey, add the pasta now, and like things like that.
Were you just like holding up your phone to do this?
Exactly.
This is why we need glasses.
Exactly. So
some other mechanism to like you know.
Right. Yeah. So I think the core problem is developing the interfaces.
Yeah.
And I think we've like moved towards this world of glasses, and like we're working on these things at Google as well. So like that could be one way that we do this, but I think there might be others too. Like the phone isn't great because you like lose some amount of mobility, so it doesn't feel as natural. But to me, like
not a necklace.
Exactly. Yeah. So people have tried necklaces as well. So I think like thinking of these models as being able to, or these systems as being able to like look over your shoulder and see what you see and help you with things in the real world, I think it's like very powerful. The question is, how do we build interfaces to actually enable this in practice? Another piece like related to this discussion that I think is very exciting is like, along with proactivity, these models being able to like at a high level multitask, right? So we have thinking models now. Imagine if I could like talk to the model, it sees what it like has vision, so it can either see me or like sees what I see, and I can think at the same time while I'm talking to the model. So it's able to like take in audio and video, but then also like think at the same time in like some form. Or we have things like Project Mariner where Gemini can like actuate on a screen and perform actions. I think a cool world is where like while I'm talking to Gemini, it's like doing things on my screen, providing me with feedback and things like that. I mean, this is like the thing that I'm really excited about, and like what I think a lot about is like, how can we make these models feel as like human or even beyond that, like superhuman as possible? And thinking of the interfaces as being as close to that as we can make it.
I love that. Ani, we talked before about how the model actually understands on the back end, like what an image looks like from a token perspective. How does that happen on the video side? Like, what's the delta between a video understanding use case and an image understanding use case behind the scenes?
Yeah, so like firstly, Gemini is like one of the only foundation models that can take in video and like state of the art at like video understanding and like reasoning over videos. For Gemini to be able to understand video, it needs to be able to understand both the audio component and the visual component. And this is like a pretty tricky problem to solve because you need these things to line up and so on. But like the way this happens today is we like interleave audio and frames that correspond to that audio at each given time chunk. And what's really remarkable is this generalizes pretty well. So the model's able to understand videos pretty well using this approach. And yeah, like feels pretty natural.
Part of this FPS conversation, and we've been kicking around a bunch of threads on this for a while, I don't have a good intuition as to like why at the model level to have multiple like different FPSs, we have to like do something. Like, why can we not just like grab more images? And does it just like make the audio bit like kind of like garbled, or like less, there's just like less context attached to each image, so you just like lose reasoning capability as it processes? Or like, why is it hard to add an FPS
Yeah.
functionality?
Yeah, like a couple of things. So the first is, like part of this is just like a function of design. So something that like seemed to work pretty well, and like 1FPS did a pretty good job. That being said, there are a bunch of use cases that having higher frame sampling helps a ton for.
Yeah.
So we've seen people come to Gemini to do things like feed in your golf swing and have Gemini rate your golf swing, or like critique your dance moves.
Yeah.
So for these types of things, having like higher FPS is yeah, like super powerful, and this is something that we're working on. We actually saw that like this was a real need when we saw customers start to slow down videos.
Yeah.
So folks would want like, let's say 5 FPS, so they'd slow down their videos by like 5x to be able to support this. Part of the reason for 1 FPS is just like the way we designed Gemini and like our tokenization. Sampling at 1 FPS supported around an hour of video. So it was like a pretty clean video length to support with these models.
Yeah.
That being said, like we've now released more efficient tokenization. So these models can do up to 6 hours of video with 2 million contexts.
This is with lower detail too.
This is with
like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, lower detail, but performance is like surprisingly very high. So we just like we like represent each frame with 64 tokens instead of 256 previously.
And what does that mean? Is it just like there's like a less verbose description of what's happening when you use, so like in a, we're sitting in a library. If you take a picture of the behind us and you did the 64 token representation, you would just like see less titles of the book, or like what actually, and maybe this is like a noisy example, so it's harder to make.
Yeah, so this is like a very abstract idea. Like what we've actually seen is, so like as our like tokenization methods have become stronger, like we need fewer tokens to like represent frames in a video. So say with Gemini 1.0, like back then representing an image with 64 tokens was just like a very lossy representation. What we see today is like actually 64 tokens performs like remarkably well, almost actually to the same quality level as 256. And like back to your question earlier of like why can't we just sample it like higher frames per second? Part of the reason is like the models were trained at the 1 FPS.
Got it.
Like sampling rate, and like what this results in is the model learning to line up audio and video at this like time frame or like sampling method. But yeah, this is something that we're working on, and like we have a bunch of cool things to share coming soon.
Yeah, I'm excited for the higher FPS bit to land so that Gemini can tell me how horrible my golf swing is, because I don't golf enough. You and I have talked a bunch about just like, and as you sort of transition to doing model personality stuff, like what does the future for Gemini multimodal stuff start to look like? Obviously we've launched a bunch of the native output modality capabilities now with audio, with image. Some future version of the world will hopefully have video as well, which would be awesome in a single model. But on the other like non-output mode, which it feels like maybe the frontier is on output modalities now and less on input modalities. But do you see there's like still a bunch of places to hill climb from a quality or capability standpoint from a multimodal input perspective? Yeah,
there's a ton. So I think the first thing is like we want to get to a world where these models are amazing at multimodal in, multimodal out. So it can take in any modality, generate any modality. And some of the generation stuff is super exciting. On the vision side, there's still a ton to do. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is bringing some of these capabilities together to form a more cohesive system. So for example, Gemini is amazing at spatial understanding. So it can generate 2D bounding boxes, 3D bounding boxes, point coordinates, segmentation masks, and so on.
This is really cool. Just for folks who haven't tried this before, if you were to like screenshot, if you're watching this video recording, if you were to screenshot and look at behind us, you can be like, go to AI Studio right now, which also has the native image generation and editing. And I think it benefits from the spatial understanding. You could say like, move the couch and Ani against the wall, and it'll understand what that actually, which is just have to make the plug for how cool it is to like actually, you say spatial understanding and people are like, that's not anything, but it's actually like so cool. And
I mean, it's like super amazing. Like the cool thing about spatial understanding is models in the past were able to do detection. The cool thing about Gemini being able to do detection is you have this reasoning backbone and world knowledge as well. So some of the cool things Gemini can do. This is like a very simple example, but you ask Gemini to detect the person that's like the furthest to the left in this image. Gemini is able to do that because it's able to reason over the image, understand like that an object is, or like the relative positioning of an object, and then generate the bounding box. Something that I tried before was I took an image of like our like the fridge in our micro kitchen, and I was like, which drink has the fewest calories, and it generated a bounding box around the bottle of water. So these things are like super cool. We're still in like very early stages of these capabilities. So I think there's like a lot more that we can do there. They still kind of feel like, they like still feel like a toy. Yeah, there's like a ton we can do there. That being said, like a lot of these niche capabilities have very specific groups of power users. So on the spatial stuff, we have folks building models for robotics that are like using these models a ton.
Yeah.
Because spatial understanding is like a core building block for like embodied reasoning and perception for robots. So what I'm excited about is like seeing some of these capabilities come together, and like both on the understanding side, but also generation. I mean, like one of the cool things that you get with spatial as well is like some notion of thinking, right? If a model can like point to objects in an image, generate bounding boxes for things in an image, that improves the model to be able to reason and think over like visual like data formats. And that's something that I also think is like super cool. And yeah, like we have like tons of folks working on.
Yeah, I think vision still feels like, to opine on a point that you've already made, like it feels like one of the areas where there's the biggest gap between the model capability and the products that people are building. Like it just feels like there's so many interesting things to be built, and like there's just not that much stuff being built, which gets me kind of excited for people who are in the position of like going and building companies around this stuff. One of the modalities that we talk a lot about is this like document understanding, maybe not modality, but use case. And we've seen a ton, like there's a ton of positive traction around Gemini and document understanding and OCR. We want to talk about that and like what it takes for the models to be good at that, like what that use case looks like, why people are so excited about it.
Yeah. So, like a ton of information is stored in documents. So it's like very clear that like documents is like a powerful like medium of information that like Gemini should be really good at analyzing and reasoning over. I think the reason why we see a ton of demand for documents as a vision use case is there were existing like vision models that were able to do OCR and translate and things like that. The cool thing that you get with Gemini though is you get these capabilities, but you get them with like the reasoning backbone that like Gemini offers.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I'm really excited about with documents is being able to feed in a ton of documents as context to the model to perform like a fairly complex like multi-step task. That's something that like existing models weren't able to do pre Gemini. And I think given that so much information at like so much personal information at companies and things like that are like stored in documents, that's like a very powerful visual use case. The other reason why using Gemini for like documents is interesting is because in the past with documents, the way these like workflows worked was users would like OCR a document and then feed that as text into like AI model, like AI systems, or like OCR these things and then store information in that medium, right? So like search over that information for retrieval and things like that. I think the cool thing about using vision to understand documents is like now you have like a really powerful system that can see a document just like a human can.
Yeah.
And some of the cool things here is like documents are often not just plain text. Like they have interesting formats. They contain charts, images, diagrams, things like that. In the past, these were very hard to like transcribe and use for like even use cases like search, but also some of these more complex tasks. The cool thing about Gemini is you can just feed all this in. Gemini like reads all these documents like a human does, and then is able to like do a ton of cool things. I mean, like something that I was trying the other day was I fed in earnings reports from companies over the last like 10 quarters with like 1 million token context, which is like tens of thousands of pages with like 2 million tokens, and like got it to like do a bunch of analysis on these companies for me. The cool thing here is like Gemini, like to be able to do this effectively, you need to be able to like read very long, intricate tables in these documents, which like previous like OCR modules like weren't as great at. So I think given that like documents are like such a massive like store of information, it like makes a ton of sense that like people are using Gemini for this, and it's something that like we care a lot about as well.
It also feels like very uniquely Google in the sense that like, you know, I think the official Google mission is organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. I think there's like so much of like data that even I was just thinking about myself. I'm like, I have a drawer somewhere in my apartment of a bunch of, you know, hard copies of paper that I'm never going to look at again. And like, it's not universally accessible in that medium, even for the data that I have today. So,
I mean, like that's an amazing point. I think two things there. This is something that I'm super excited about on Vision is I think it like unlocks Vision as like a store of information and makes like visual information so much more accessible and useful to Google's mission. So with like documents, we see this like Gemini is amazing at like what we call layout preserving transcription. So it can transcribe a document and preserve layout, style, structure. The other really cool way that like Vision makes information more accessible is video actually. So something that like we see a ton of people do is like take videos of things around them, feed these videos into Gemini, and then use that to catalog information. So yeah, like a ton of people take videos of their bookshelf and like libraries and then like catalog that information.
Yeah, I do this in AI Studio all the time where I'll take like long videos of like whatever topic someone talked about in a podcast that I was a part of or I listened to or whatever it was, and like have them pull out, you know, interesting clips and stuff like that. It's super, super powerful to not have to, especially with content where I don't want to hear myself have to talk. You let the model take care of all do the work.
Exactly. It also makes like tasks far more efficient. So something that I did when I was like at our office in London was like we have like a very nice library there, and I took a video of like all the books in this library and asked Gemini to catalog these books by genre, by author. And because Gemini has this like world knowledge, reasoning backbone, but then also these visual capabilities and like a single model, I was able to do this super well. I did the same thing at our micro kitchens. Like
let's try this here after this.
Yeah, it's something that I've been trying since the Gemini 1.0 days is like cataloging snacks in our like MKs.
Yeah.
And these models are now like pretty much perfect at these use cases. And I think this like goes to some of the questions around user interfaces as well. Like this is something that doesn't feel like a natural use case because it hasn't been possible before. Like people are very used to using Vision for like traditional OCR, translate, classification, these types of things. But what like Gemini's multimodal capabilities gives us is the ability to like do so much more that we previously wouldn't have thought was possible. And I think like that'll take some time to play out as well.
Ani, one of the sort of consistent threads of, and I don't even, maybe this is intentional, maybe it's not, I'd have to reflect on this, of a lot of the conversations we have with people through this podcast is just about like how much the like team, you know, sort of team Gemini, like everyone there's like deep collaboration, there's all the different modalities getting better, makes other people's modalities better. Like I'm curious, like on the multimodal side, like as someone who has a little bit less context of like what the team looks like and what the structure is, like how do you think about that? Like what's happening? Who are the research people? All that stuff.
Yeah,
I know there's a ton of people, but
so there are like a ton of people. Firstly, like I'm just a spokesperson for like a massive research team, and like the Gemini multimodal team is like the most amazing team. And we've like grown a ton since the Gemini 1.0 days, which also shows like how strong these capabilities are getting. I think the thing that's like really awesome is multimodal has like so many of these capabilities and like a ton of things that we've spoken about. And like what you need to make this happen, like it's like what's a very hard problem is you need to like bring these capabilities together into a single model and make sure that like each capability performs super well. And we have JB who like leads our multimodal team. He's a rock star. He's been working on Vision from before Gemini, like back in the Flamingo days. And we have work stream leads, image, video, and like all of these things, spatial. And I think what's been like really remarkable is like how like all of this has come together into a single model that is like super strong at these at these multimodal capabilities.
Yeah, it's very interesting to reflect on. Like I don't think that's like the default outcome. I think this is like maybe it's maybe it's just we have great people who work really well together, but like I think it's hard to make that collaboration happen, and it's so cool to see like time and time again like it actually plays out and it works, and like we get the great results from a model perspective, from everyone coming together. So it's awesome to see.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's like really awesome is I think the team really thinks really deeply about like how developers and consumers will use these vision capabilities. And I think we like really try and build strong intuition for this and bring that into our model. So we have this like very close product model feedback loop. And the second is we spend a lot of time thinking about and like chatting with each other about how people will use these capabilities in the future. So if we extrapolate to like these capabilities becoming much stronger and like coming together in like a cohesive way, like what are the ways that people are going to interact with these models a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And a lot of the capabilities that go in today are like building blocks towards this vision that our team has, which I also think is like super powerful.
Yeah, it's been awesome to see all the progress on multimodal for the last year. It's been awesome to collaborate with you and JB and the multimodal team. So I'm super appreciative of all the hard work that y'all have done, even outside the model stuff. Like, if folks have complaints about the multimodal API docs, go to Ani and he'll help make them better. But you're transitioning now to go start working on model behavior stuff. So we won't do a deep dive on model behavior, but just to sort of plant the seed, what is I think this is definitely somewhat emergent right now. So like what will you be thinking about next?
Yeah, so I think related to some of the things we've spoken about, something that I think is like a very important problem is having these models feel like they're natural to interact with. I go back to this like the like world today where we have these like very turn-based systems. It feels kind of unnatural. It feels a bit dated. And something that I'm passionate about is like building AI systems that feel likable, that you can like interact naturally with. So, I mean, like going into more detail on the model behavior stuff, how this translates is like giving the model skills like empathy and being able to understand the user, understand implied intent, giving the model like a personality while it's striking the balance of like all of these like amazing raw capabilities that Gemini has. I think the other piece to some of this is a lot of the AI use cases today, like these models just give you a ton of text. Something that I've been thinking a ton about is like, are there interesting visual formats that we could use to be able to like communicate information in like a more information dense or like high calorie manner like the way that we like to think about these things. And I think it's like a very critical problem for like making Gemini like a nice model to talk to and interact with.
I'm excited for this. I think my seed to plant with you is that people really like the way that the sort of notebook LM audio overview personality is, and like the way that it sort of engages from a conversational standpoint is like super, super relatable, and folks really like it. So I think there's some interesting thread to pull on that, which we'll have to catch up more about this sometime in the future and see if there's any interesting outcomes. But to give you credit for folks who have been watching, you and the multimodal team have been, I think, like one of, on the AI Studio Gemini API side, some of our strongest collaborators. And I think it's been a ton of fun to work with you and the team to like do that. Like it feels like this very unique like research to product acceleration story, which is like, you all care about what the API looks like and what the capabilities are and all this stuff. So I'm appreciative of you and JB and everyone else for pushing so hard to make all that happen.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks so much for bringing these capabilities to life through AI Studio.
Thanks for taking the time to sit down and chat everything multimodal, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.